If it has the red on it, it means it's not on. Make sure in some way that you're kind of eating the mic so that it's recorded well for the video. And then with that, if we don't mind just introducing ourselves, just to make sure if there are news reporters who don't know who we are, they know who we are. Ms. MacArthur, would you mind starting? And we'll go down this way.
Sure. Hi, I am Heather MacArthur. I am the Chief Financial Officer for Columbia Public Schools.
Ryan Eulis, I'm Chief Financial Officer for the Electric Cooperative.
John Lyman, I'm on the school board.
Tom Richards, volunteer member.
Brian Hewitt, superintendent.
Blake Willoughby, board member.
Are you done, Blake? Randy Gooch, Chief Operations Officer.
All right, so I'll go ahead and,
Okay, Noelle McDonald, I'm board secretary.
so with that, I'll go ahead and officially call us to order at 4:32. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call it to a vote. All those in favor of approving the agenda, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please do the same. All right, unanimously approved. Moving on, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting? Tom Richards motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion on the minutes? All right, seeing none, I'll call it to a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the previous meeting, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please do the same. All right, approved. Moving on to our next item, we are first going to hear about the Nutrition Services Program update from Ms. Fulham and Ms. MacArthur.
Thank you. I'm going to have Lena Fulham come up here and help me as we go through this presentation tonight. We're giving you a nutrition services update, some of the year-end data from last year for fiscal year 23 and where we're at so far this year and some of our goals and initiatives.
Want me to go ahead and get started?
Yep.
Okay, great. Do I have to keep holding it down? Push it. Okay, gotcha. All right. It is. Oh, okay. Okay. Great. Okay. Well, I'm Lena Fulham, Director of Nutrition Services, and we're going to show you which programs we implement in my department, which is the lunch program, breakfast program, snack program, which is strictly after school, seamless summer, which is free meals for specific buildings that meet a criteria, preschool snacks and meals, donated foods, which are commodities, or used to be called commodities, I still call them that. And what that does is it gives us, this year, I think it was $821,000 towards items that we can purchase for the National School Lunch Program, food items that is, and that's through USDA and Department of Education. We have 7 schools that are in community eligibility provision, and those are all free meals for both breakfast and lunch because of their direct certification numbers. We do summer lunch in Douglas Park. We also are reinstating some farm-to-school activities. We are definitely interested in waste diversion, and we've been trying to look at another grant for waste diversion, mostly with CACC at this time. And then we have Provision 2 breakfast, which is for 4 of our schools, which is free breakfast for our schools.
And can you explain a little bit, since a lot of us here are new tonight, about what CEP means and how we get reimbursed in that process?
Sure, I can. So every April, we have to take a direct certification count of all of our, well, direct certification students are all free. So that's a direct download from Department of Education and Department of Social Services, and those families get automatic free meals. No questions asked, because we pull it directly from DSS. And so what we do is every April, we look at every single school and what their direct certification numbers are. How many free kids do we have that are automatically free? And if they are a certain percentage, and we usually look about 70% of our students as direct certification, so that we can give them free meals. They're eligible at 40%, but we look at after a multiplier, which is a 1.6 multiplier, so that we can account for the applications that are not accounted for in direct certification. And so what happens with that is the reduced category drops out. We have reimbursement for paid meals, and we have reimbursement for free meals only. And so it could be something like 70-30 or 80-20, or if you have, Douglas is almost 100%, something like that. So that's our CEP.
And so there's a percentage that we want to get to, because we don't get reimbursed, obviously, for everyone, that the break-even point that we look at.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously, we would love to be able to offer free meals to all of our schools, or a
Yes.
lot of the ones that are title schools, but there's a cost benefit to that. And so that's when we look at the direct certification and how many free and reduced lunch percentages is to be able to continue to operate and still be able to meet the needs of those students in those schools.
Right. And we have on good authority, I've heard from the Director of Department of Education, School Food Services, that Missouri is looking at universal meals like 10 other states that we have in the United States.
So this next slide shows a little bit about our participation history. You can see back before COVID and 17-18 and 18-19 were above the $1.7 million mark, and then again in 19-20 when we went virtual, and 2021 those numbers dropped off, and then we had the highest year there in 21-22 because all of our meals were free again that year, and then last year, 22-23, we came in at 1.6 million, so we're still trying to work back up towards where we were pre-COVID numbers. You want to, anything else you want to include about what's included in those numbers? I think snacks are in addition to those as well.
Yes, snacks are in there as well. We usually, well, actually, I don't think yeah, they are. They are in there. Snacks are in there as well, because what we do is we use a formula to determine what our meals per labor hour are. And so we take a la carte, and we also look at our snacks and any other catering we do. But the catering is not in there, so just the meals and snacks.
So this next slide shows our history for our a la carte sales. And the a la carte sales, again, this is just those that are not like a full meal. So when you go through the lunch line and buy just, like my kids do, like a water bottle or a bag of chips or like all the side type items, we refer to those as our a la carte sales. These numbers are just reflect those. We do have some other non-program type items that are, Nutrition Services records that are not included in these numbers, like board meals and snacks as non-program revenue. But again, these are just a la carte sales. And there was a drop off back in 17-18 and 18-19 because that is when we started our pizza program, and previously that became a fully reimbursable meal, so that it was no longer served like via a la carte. And so that's what we had a decline there back before the 17-18, and you can see the decrease there into our COVID numbers, but we are steadily trying to climb back up because those do support our services and at the Nutrition Services Fund too, to help us break even in that fund with these a la carte sales.
Our goals are always, oh, I'm sorry, were you finished with that slide? Okay. Our goals are always financial solvency. We have to work very hard to fight inflation. We know what the grocery store prices are right now. We are experiencing that as well. One of our biggest increases is benefits That is a rising cost that doesn't seem to have a cap. We are into farm to school, and as I mentioned before, we are trying to get back to more of that in our cafeteria. We already have a farm to school coordinator, and she is charged with going out to our Title I schools and teaching 17 lessons to all of those third and fifth graders. And they also work with the Columbia Center for Urban Agriculture next door, and they also go on field trips with them. So we hope to someday expand that even further, but we do want to get it back in our cafeterias as well. And again, I'm sorry, yes.
That position, that is a CPS position.
It is a CPS position. It's funded 2/3 by CCUA and 1/3 by us. So. And then, again, we're always interested in lessening our carbon footprint. We recycle all of our cans and cardboard in our kitchens, and we would like to do more composting. We did try that once upon a time, but COVID hit, and it just basically wiped out the grant that we were using at the time.
So are those FTS initiatives, are those sourced locally?
Yes, since we're so big, we have to do Missouri and all the surrounding states because we're just too big to just do Columbia, or Missouri. So, and of course, like any of our programs, we have challenges. One of our challenges is re-educating families to fill out a free or reduced application. And how that impacts the district is that we have a lot of student debt, is what we call student debt, which are paid and reduced students who are not paying for their meals, and so that just accumulates. We have rising costs of operations, continuing increases in federal and state regulations. So every 5 years, we get a new set of regulations that adds to the 5 years previous. So that continues to build. Return to full price and reduced price meals. Again, that same impact of having meals that are not being paid for. Employee recruitment, we're still struggling with that, although this year has been much better than previous years, but we still are struggling with maintaining staff, keeping them. So we try very hard to keep them happy. We have our unpaid meal balances, and we are continuing to struggle with integration of our newest software for the last 2 years. So speaking of our software, we implemented our software, actually it was in 2021, 2022, it was April, and it has, we used it for a full year last year, and we have bled into this year. Cybersoft is the name of the company, and School Cafe is the actual module that we're using, and there were 3 that we were wanting to integrate. One was the point of service, where we count our students so that we can claim them for reimbursement. The next one is inventory, so that we can make sure we're tracking our cost and how much we're spending on groceries. And then menu planning, so that we can talk to our schools about what you're supposed to be serving on any given day. Plus, we have to be accountable to the State Department to make sure we're serving specific items. So that will help keep us organized. We have not started the inventory or menu planning in its entirety. We did start, and it just was such an inefficient system that we couldn't continue. It was too difficult. So we stuck with NutriKids for the time being, and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do next. It is a cloud-based system. That is the reason that we actually decided to go, because we know the future is no longer in modular software, because what it takes to have modular software is our techs have to go from building to building to building, machine to machine to machine. And if it's online, then they don't have to do that. It's just present all the time. So, but we have struggled with that, and let's see here. It does have some great features, but they are just not fully realized yet. They're not actualized yet. So.
And so this was a system that, again, like she said, this is a cloud-based. They had a kind of a different platform that was not cloud-based, but we were kind of one of the first ones to move to the cloud-based program. And it just hasn't been fully functional the way it was intended to. So we're working through, we got a lot of documentation about next steps, but we may, just so that you guys know and the board knows, we probably may be looking forward to a new RFP this spring if they cannot be able to give us what we needed and intended to begin with when we went to this platform.
And so those issues of implementation are not implementation on our end. Like we're not in that struggling. It's the
That
fact
is
that
correct.
it's the software that's
It's
not
the
functioning
software.
the way. Okay.
Yes, I mean, inaccurate accounts, poor tracking of free and reduced students, you name it. I mean, the point of service where our cashiers are cashiering, it'll stop sometimes, it'll lose counts. So, I mean, I could go on, and I won't, but yeah, lots of issues that really affect our revenue, essentially. So, yeah.
And especially when we're short-staffed already, so we don't need to have additional problems. That is supposed to be helping with our efficiencies, not taking away from those efficiencies. And so really making sure that we have the best platform to be able to meet the needs of our department.
Okay, the things we do well, we efficiently feed students. We do a lot of, as you saw from the previous slides, we feed a lot of students every single day. Farm to school efforts have been great in the past, and they still continue to be good, but we want to beef them up again, status post-COVID. Financial accountability, we try very hard to stay in the black and not be a burden to the district. Free and reduced application processing, we are the ones that do all of that for the district, and that also affects any grants that the district may want to consider because they always use free and reduced numbers, and they're also more reliable than, say, census data. Okay. Nutrition education, we have 2 nutrition educators on staff, and since we're short-staffed, unfortunately, that has also fallen by the wayside. We are getting ready to pick that back up, but we have also partnered with Extension, MU Extension, and they're going to help continue that nutrition education. And then sustainability efforts, as I keep mentioning.
So this next slide shows our fund balance history, and just a reminder, our Nutrition Services Fund is its own self-sustaining fund, so it's separate from what we usually refer to as our operating funds. So our operating funds are our general fund and our teachers fund that we report together. Nutrition Services is a totally separate fund, so the revenues that go into that fund are what supports then the expenditures that go out of that fund. And you can see here the 5-year history of our fund balance in the Nutrition Services Fund. And we were continuing to operate without subsidy from our operating fund prior to COVID, but you can see there in 1920 and 2020-21 there was a transfer in, and that's because we made the decision, the board at that time had made the decision to continue to pay employees during virtual learning, even though we didn't have any income to cover those expenses. And so those transfers in there in 1920 and 2020-21 did come from our operating fund. And 21-22, then we received some additional stimulus funding, and that's why our revenues were so much higher that year, because we had some federal money, that additional federal money beyond what we normally would receive for our school lunch and school breakfast programs that went into that fund. And so our revenues were over our expenditures for 21-22, and so we started out our fiscal year 22-23 with a fund balance of $2.4 million. And we had a slight of overage of our expenditures over revenues last year, and so our ending fund balance on June 30 of 2023 was right under $2 million. Again, we do continue to fight, like we said, on the rising costs. Of course, when we increase salaries and benefits is the largest portion of that fund, just like it's the largest portion of the costs of our operating funds as well. And so for our employees, that we want to make sure that those employees within our Nutrition Services Fund are continuing to get raises as well, and we're continuing to put improvements into salary schedules for some of our lowest paid employees in that fund. And so you can see there, those expenditures continue to rise as our salaries and benefits. And Lena's done a great job with hiring like some part-time employees, but some of the benefits, some of those employees really need benefits as well. So she's done some different things to be able to make them full-time, but that's also an additional expense because then we have to benefit those employees as well. And so, but just really making sure that we're doing not only what's best for our kids, but for our employees as well. But we also, there may be a time when we have to consider subsidizing that fund again if we can't sustain our revenues. Won't be able to sustain that. But Lena does a great job of finding efficiencies within that fund. But again, salaries and benefits are just the largest driver of those increasing costs.
And just as making sure that I understand correctly, in that sense of when we say our food services and nutrition services is self-sustaining, what we mean by that is beyond, at least on this chart, those 2 years, no local taxes have gone into our food services. It's all, yes, state funds and federal funds have gone in for free and reduced lunch and things of that nature, but it is that nutrition services has been a department that is functioning with those funds and then with paid meals and not taking out of the local taxes that we
That is
raise.
correct.
Correct. The largest source of revenue in there is our federal revenue, which is from our school lunch and our school breakfast program. But we do get a lot of that money that's able to subsidize some of those other from our paid meals and our a la carte, which paid meals are considered program revenues, but we also have some non-program revenues like our a la carte sales and some other, like they provide snacks to buildings sometimes when they have parent events and board meetings. Sometimes she prepares meals for here, but some other non-program type revenues. But yes, the largest source of is the federal funds, but a lot of that local money that comes from our paid meals is what is the additional money that kind of is allow us to be able to maintain our fund balance there as well. And so this slide shows the lunch debt that we've written off. I know Lena mentioned before, our lunch debt that has accumulated over was a significant issue prior to COVID. We've done some different things, and the board's made different directives, but we've tried to pay for it from the operating fund back, prior to 2017-18. Some of our high schools or secondary schools were absorbing some of that debt, but again, that was an equity issue where you're trying to, like, some of the schools have larger debt balances, obviously, than some of our others, and then you saw the drop off between when we had free meals during that COVID time. So that's why there was a time period between there before 21, 22 that there was no additional debt accumulating. But then in 21, 22, we wrote off the remainder of that debt, $18,198. But then we had rising debt last year with the re-education of the meals were no longer free, and so we had some rising. But then 22, 23, you can see then $91,824 is the amount of debt that was turned over to our collection agency in August 2023 from the 22-23 school year. At one point, I think it was about twice that much, but we did some efforts internally, and they worked really hard to get some of those people. Again, this is not people that can't pay; it's people that can pay. To make sure that we got those balances down before, and they had every opportunity that they could to get those paid off before we turned them over to our collection agency in August.
Can you briefly run down the order of operations for that? I know we had the discussion before about how that all works, like when the phone calls and emails and texts and notes home and that
Yes.
to folks. Can you run down that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, hold on, I'll fast forward here. It is, there
There
is,
is.
look.
That's okay.
So while we're talking about it, you're gonna go ahead.
Yeah, I will, yeah. So every Monday, anyone who owes even a penny, they get an email from me, or they get something sent to their school if they don't have an email. And they also get a phone call if they owe just even 1 penny. And then if they owe -25, they get a second phone call on the Wednesday following that. And so those are the efforts that we make to try and get families to pay their bill. We, of course, occasionally send out an application as well, just in case they may have missed it the first several times that was sent, because we obviously know our free families cannot afford the price of their children's meals. So.
And that goes out on
All the time, every week, every single week.
you owe $1, you're short $1, and you get the call, you get the text, you get the email and all that,
Right.
and you also get the application.
Not the application every time. No.
That's when you hit 25.
No, well, what we do is we will occasionally send out the application again to let people know that we take applications all year long.
Okay.
So, yeah.
The schools help with that education process too, because they a lot of times know what families might need help or might not, because they're on the kind of the boots on the ground in the schools, and so they. Yes, all the time, and so they make sure, Elena works with our school leaders as well to make sure that they're getting those. But even if my kids don't pay, I get the calls too.
Is there a review process that if a student is able to pay and becomes unable to pay for lunches during them building up that bad debt?
A review process?
So, yeah, so I'm going backwards on this thing. What I'm talking about is if they,
One slide, yeah.
okay, I can't see the, yeah. If, you're going after students that have the ability to pay, but at some point, there may have been circumstantial changes where they no longer have the ability to pay. I'm just
Right.
wondering if you continue through that bad debt process, or if there's a review to say, has this student become, due to conditions at home or whatever, become uneligible to pay for the lunches?
That would have to come from the building. The parents would have to come forward and talk with a principal or a homeschool communicator, because we don't have that contact, well, at least my office does not have that contact with the families or the children. We don't mention the debt to the students. So we're unaware of, what might be going on, because we assume if they're paid or reduced that they are able to pay those fees. We just have too many that we couldn't possibly follow up with them, which is why we send out the texts and the emails and the phone calls so that we can reach them and let them know that something's going on.
And prior to when we turned the money over in August, like, we wrote off a lot of the free and reduced, the parents that had like subsequently qualified for free or reduced price meals after they had accumulated debt. We didn't even we don't try to collect that. We just write that off. So the only part the only debt that was turned over was either if we didn't know or that we assume that those are paid meals.
And we do have an ongoing donation account for families. If they were to come forward and they say, this is what's going on, the first thing I'm going to have them do is fill out an application, just to be sure they're not free, because we want to stop the bleeding, essentially. But then we will clear their bill with any donated funds we might have, and hope that they can keep up from that point forward. Yeah.
And just real quickly, this slide right before here, because we did turn over, like I said, we turned over quite a bit of debt in August that was accumulated last year. But just since August, as of last week when we were pulling together the numbers for this presentation, we've already accumulated almost $70,000 in additional debt just since August, since we wrote that. So it does continue to be a problem. It's a huge time suck for Elena and her employees to continue to follow up and do it, but we are continuing to we do everything humanly possible really to try and make sure that they have every opportunity to fill out an application if they need one. If they need help filling out the application, her employees sit down, or those people, our building leaders and people in the school continue to help those individuals fill out applications. But I mean, again, it does continue to, unfortunately, to be a problem.
There are 3 people who've already gotten $250 since August.
Yes.
How much is a school lunch now?
It is secondary is $3.20 and elementary is $3. It adds up quickly. If you're eating breakfast and lunch, it adds up fast. Yes. And you also have to understand that there could have been some that rolled over from last year, and maybe they were $25. I'm not going to send them to collections if they're $25. That wouldn't make any sense.
How do the numbers compare? Do you do like a key ratio trend analysis compared to other school districts, similar school districts? I'm just curious how your numbers compare to
Right.
other districts.
I have not, but I was recently in Lee Summit, and theirs is probably triple that. And they're about the size of
This
us.
number doesn't seem real bad considering the number of meals served.
But that's probably true, yes. We work really hard to keep these down. We try to make sure folks know what's going on, yeah.
We know for sure it's a nation. It's a nationwide issue, and even some of our local other Boone County schools have the same issue. I mean, obviously on a much smaller scale, but those schools, like our Southern Boones, and have the issue as well, or Jeff City, just down the road. But we for sure, all school districts around here are fighting the same issues.
We chose a long time ago to let the child eat and deal with the parents.
100%. No one is turned away
No
at
one, ever.
at the food. They always get the food that they want. That's all we have. Does anyone have any questions? Anything else while we have Lena here? She's the expert.
I just think that that needs to be emphasized again, that it doesn't matter how much the child may owe, if they're coming up and wanting and needing a meal, that we're giving it to them. Because you see it all the time across the nation where somebody goes up and it's, hey, I'm sorry, I can't. But we're absolutely not ever doing that.
No, we are not. It breaks our staff's heart. They don't want to do it, and so we stop doing it.
And we don't even offer alternative meals. They are allowed to have whatever meal
Whatever
they
it
said. If
is.
it's a paid meal, we still offer the full meal. We don't make you get a peanut butter and jelly or cheese sandwich or whatever it is. They still are allowed a hot meal.
Well, that's a money waster. If you take away one tray and give them another, that's just a money waster. So.
In that sense, we don't turn away, but if that child goes to a la carte, what is that process like?
That's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. We do not allow a la carte. So a lot of times if you were to get a concern from a parent, more than likely it was a la carte. And so if we see, we have a great, well, not a great system, but a system that tells us enough about what they owe or how much money they have in their account as they're going through. And if they're trying to get a la carte and not a complete meal, then that is taken away, essentially. Yeah, encouraged to take a real meal. So.
I just want to comment and say, I'm in year 5, and I mean, this annual presentation of where our nutrition services are at, Lena, you do a really good job, and that's not me like blowing smoke or anything like that. I mean, it is
Appreciate
kind
that.
of phenomenal how you are able to feed all the kids that we have and the amount that it is while keeping this program solvent in a lot of ways. And I mean, I think about back when during COVID, how you were able to rally your team and feeding kids as we were dealing with everything that we were dealing. And I think, it's been a couple years. I think we forget about like all that heavy work, as well as it's a little traumatic, so we block it out. But I just want to thank you, because I think that it's not something that we say thank you all the time, but you did a huge thing for us.
I have a great team. I really do.
Thank you, Lena. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, moving on to our next item for discussion, budget priorities.
Yes, so we just quickly tonight, this is a kind of the introduction to our budget season. I'm going to give you guys some homework. And so typically in January, we talk about our budget parameters and start working through priorities as a district, as leadership, as a board, and about what we're going to start as we start building the next year, the 24-25 school year budget. And so your homework from now until January is to look at, this is what I printed out for you what last year's budget parameters were. Those are kind of our overarching guidelines of when we're building the budget. If they're to look through those, and if you have any comments, suggestions, changes, edits that you would like for me to include when I bring it back to you in January, then you need to reach out to me. You can, I don't care. You can do it electronically. You can do a phone call. You do it, and I'm gonna accumulate everyone's changes, and I'm gonna bring those back to you in January. And then Finance Committee will look at it first before we then take it. They'll move forward to. It'll be an action item in January to move forward to the board to vote on what the overarching parameters and the budget priorities are for next school year as we start that process.
When would you like those?
As soon as possible, because Noelle and I started talking about, we basically have like 2 weeks tops to turn around the December and January board meetings this month, because we have Christmas break in there. And of course, January this year is January 8th. January 3rd is the Finance Committee meeting, which is the day we come back from Christmas break. The first day kids are back, and then the board meeting is the earliest date could possibly be on January 8th. And so if we could have these, I mean, I would love it if we could have it before Christmas break, but I will be working. There's no way I would be able to like not get on my computer for 2 weeks. So I'm sure I will be around during that time to start preparing that stuff together. But I mean, if you have ideas sooner rather than later, I will say is better.
So like send you an email no later than Christmas Eve so that you can see it
Yes.
after the
I mean,
holiday.
December 22nd is the Friday. That would be fabulous
Okay.
if it was before that. But if not, I know everybody has stuff going on as well. But
Any questions around our guidance and homework that we have as a committee?
I really want to make sure, I mean, we talk about this all the time, and it's not Heather's budget, it's our district budget, and we really want to make sure that we have everyone's voice and everyone's input is heard. So we want to make sure as we start this process that we really have the overarching goals of Finance Committee and our full board to move forward in the budget process. As we start, I've already started receiving requests for next year for different service FTE ads and different things. And so as we like to have our guiding principles established as we go through that process, so it's a lot easier for us to prioritize what we want to move forward and bring to the board as additions and deductions for next year.
And when it comes to edits, it's not just the parameters page, it's also, do you want any suggestions on budget goals and priorities with?
Both of them, please. Yes.
Could
I mean, I will update the kind of the preface, obviously, that talks about like where our revenues are at, we'll get our final assessed valuations here coming in at the end of December as well. And so we'll know what our numbers was, we'll know kind of what our percentages, what our final property tax revenues are gonna look like, what those increases are over the previous year. We'll get some, and we'll start getting information from the state. We have some preliminary information has come out from the state about like what our SAT is going to, state adequacy target's going to be for the foundation formula for next year, but we'll just start accumulating all that information. But yes, anything that we want to make sure that we have in those parameters and priorities we want to have from you starting the beginning of January.
Could you briefly explain, like, the process? Like, you talk about not being your budget, so who is the principals, superintendents feeding into that, or were there specific requests that they make?
Yes, and so in January, we'll kick off budget season basically with the approval of the budget parameters and the priorities. And then internally, administration starts meeting one-on-one with every department leader, every building leader. We start talking about looking at our enrollment, looking at building and class sizes, projections from our data department. So we know where movement of teachers are between schools. If one school's gonna have increased enrollment, another school will have decreased enrollment, where we have teacher movement, where we have retirements. Start talking about if we have, the posting, if they have retirements for teachers. Also, like if they have certain sections that we have that we know that are that are over where we like really want for some of our class sizes that we want to add in certain schools. And so we'll start accumulating those requests. And then not only just for classroom teachers, it's a lot easier at the elementary level because you just have one teacher for across the board for your class sizes, and you can divide that by the number in each grade level to get your class sizes. Then you start getting into your electives and those types of things in your secondary schools. And our middle schools, we do teaming. There's going to be some of our class sizes, again, fluctuate. There's some ebb and flow with large class sizes. Our current sophomores and juniors are really large in the high school level, but our rising eighth graders going into high school are going to be as a smaller class. So like what do our class sizes look at each, between elementary, middle, and high school level? And then they also start bringing, do you have a need for additional counselors? Do we have a need for additional electives? Do you have a need for additional homeschool communicators? District-wide supports as operational needs, and I start making a list, and we start going through those, and about by the end of February, we start, I've had that list, and the cabinet starts going through it and prioritizing it based on what our parameters are and our priorities are for the next year. I mean, so we have a lot of ebb and flow, especially the last couple of years in our specialized populations. Our special education population continues to grow. So do we need to add more teachers? Do we need to add more, those specialized special education positions? Do we have our English language population continues to grow? So we have our director of EL that says we went from 1,200 to 1,500 kids, and there's no way we can, keep up with the capacity. And so we start reviewing those different numbers of those and accumulating a list, and then by the end of February, beginning of March, cabinet reviews it, and then we start looking at the additions in March, April. We'll go to the board meeting, and they hear from me lots between the months of February, March, April, May, between when we start the budget process and when we end the budget process. And we try to be as collaborative as possible, meeting internally, again, with all of our department leaders. Each one of our building and departments also do zero-based budget requests for all their service and supply needs. And so they know what their service and supplies budgets were from the previous year. They have the ability to go in and look at historical data. If they want to link their budgets to their building goals, their BSIPs, as we call them, the building strategic plans, just like our overall, our strategic plan for the district-wide, and really how those budgets, what needs do they have, what is their specific professional development they want to do that links to their specific building plans. And so they have the ability and to be able to go through those budgets each year and make requests based on what their priorities are for their buildings and individual departments.
Each building's not generating their own financial budget. They're talking more about needs on a teacher, classroom, student basis.
So they actually, each building does have the ability, they have the budgets that they have. Obviously, each building doesn't have control over like the district-wide maintenance budget, but they have individual administrative budgets, instructional budget, and a professional development budget, that those three individual budgets that every building in the district has. And so they have control. The building principal or the leader has control over those budgets, and they have the ability to build those budgets and request those funds based on how they want for their individual schools. And then they send me their spreadsheets, and we start accumulating those, starting at the end of January as well.
Like one of these things is if at the high school level, if there's an FTE that they know someone's retiring or something like that, they'll send requests if they want to potentially change what that FTE is about. If that building principal is like, we want to see a different kind of programmatic change, in making those requests and conversations. And the additional thing that you left out, Ms. MacArthur, is all of this is going on in the backdrop of negotiations with our union. And in that kind of conversation of you're having to account and think about, at the end of the day, where are we going to be as a full budget once we do finalize that contract?
Right. And so everyone's favorite line that I say is, there's only one pot of money. So if we have 82 different requests for new positions, and that's all coming out of the same budget that our salary increases are coming out of. So there's always this balance between, do we want more support or do we want higher individual salaries? And so as we go, that's always in the back of our mind too, as we're working through the negotiation process. There's only one pot of money, so how much money do we have? That one, to be able to not only make sure that our buildings have what they need and with FTE requests and those type of things, but also to make sure that we're continuing to put money into salaries to stay competitive with our district, not only our surrounding districts, but our comparative districts in Kansas City and St. Louis. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, guys.
All right, so now I move for us to adjourn into executive session for the purpose of confidential and privileged communication between the district and its auditors in accordance with RS Mo 610.02117. Is there a second? Second by Tom Richards. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please do the same. All right, we are now adjourned into executive session.